Laure-Anne Bosselaar grew up in Belgium and moved to the United States in 1987. She is the author of These Many Rooms, Four-Way Books 2019, A New Hunger, Aussible Press 2007, Small Gods of Grief, Boa Editions 2001, which won the Isabella Gardner Prize for Poetry, and The Hour Between Dog and Wolf, Boa Editions 1997. Did I mention that she is Poet Laureate of Santa Barbara as well? Lucky, lucky Santa Barbara. Laure-Anne is fluent in 4 languages, French and Flemish among them. I can't help but imagine that these languages and their rich spectrum of sound are what at least in part create the magic of Laure-Anne's exquisite ear that knows just where and how to cluster sounds, break a line, or offer a little silence. During the pandemic as Poet Laureate of Santa Barbara, Laure-Anne put her efforts into gathering the voices of local poets and collecting them in an anthology called While You Wait, which was distributed free to all healthcare workers in thanks for their endurance and courage. Laure-Anne even managed to get a QR code for an online version of the anthology placed in the waiting rooms of hospitals, as well as on Santa Barbara buses. In a time when many of us isolated in our houses and apartments, Laure-Anne found a way to reach out to others with this great gift of poetry. I feel so lucky myself to be the recipient of her famous, famous warmth, even the way she begins an email, "Hello, dear Sally." I so look forward to the festival next year, where hopefully we will see each other in person and share again those laughter-filled dinners. In our last correspondence, Laure-Anne said she would be reading mostly new poems written after walking on her beloved beach with her rescue dog, Luna. She sent me a few of those. As Charles Simic said, Laure-Anne writes wise poems about memory, poems whose art lies in their ability to make these memories ours too. What more could anyone ask of poetry? What has always struck me about Laure-Anne's work is the intimacy of her tone, how close she draws the reader. There is often in her voice a sense of great love and longing. In one of the poems she emailed to me, which I just adore, called Invitation, she addresses an awkward little cloud crumb by saying, "Stay, I see you, I notice." The reader too feels both noticed and noticing too, along with the speaker. The poem ends, "If you do go, then rain your soaked heart here. Come so I can join you." Laure-Anne is a poet who appreciates the smallest gestures of kindness that others might overlook or take for granted. And these moments fill the speaker's heart and too the reader's heart. Laure-Anne's poems help us love the world. What a special gift we receive in reading them, especially at this difficult time. In a poem called Parentage, she mentions a Flemish farmer who plants a long ago quick, innocent kiss on her brow, but with such will and tenderness that I can now lift my head to the clouds. Wow. And Laure-Anne can plumb the depths of grief more vividly than almost any poet I know. I love what Tim Siebels said of Laure-Anne's poems upon the loss of her beloved Kurt. Such grief demands that we feel too much. We find ourselves pressed into a silence that even our closest companions hesitate to engage. Laure-Anne Bosselaar breaks open this silence, writing frankly and with sublime grace on this difficult walk. We are offered an intricately detailed map of that half-lit wilderness each person must enter when confronted by overwhelming loss. Laure-Anne's poems love the world with all its beauties, all its faults. Her positive spirit is encapsulated for me by one of her many stunning images. She is herself like the dandelion's defiant gold blazing out of concrete rock. Please welcome Laure-Anne Bosselaar.
Wow. Sally, thank you. Thank you. That's generous and kind. And I feel that I was read and heard. And I know the work that goes into writing introductions. It's a lot of work. So thank you for the time you gave. And thank you for your warmth and friendship. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Susan and Jennifer and Marcy and our fabulous interns, Brittany and Ronnie, and also all the poets in our, and I'm not saying my workshop, I'm saying our workshop, all the poets in our workshop that are not only talented, but emotionally courageous and attentive and intelligent and hungry and impossibly questioning everything which I adore, and who joyfully disagree about aspects of craft so that we go deep into discussions. Fabulous, fabulous. And then my heart and my love to you, Mimi and Miles. You already have my love. You already have my gratitude. But here it is again, it's like chocolate. You can eat as much as you want. I'm going to start by reading a poem by a California poet is a bit more north from where I live. Her name is Danusha Lameres, and Sally was mentioning kindness. It's a poem about kindness, and I'm going to talk a lot about kindness in my reading tonight, because God, do we need kindness? We really do. And I'm thinking of the many people who, like me, live absolutely alone, and for the last almost 2.5 years have been alone and need all the kindness we can get. Small Kindnesses by Danusha Lameres. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by, or how strangers still say, bless you, when someone sneezes left over from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we're saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them, and for them to smile back, for the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire, only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, these fleeting temples we make together when we say, here, have my seat. Oh, go ahead, you first. I like your hat. Danusha Lameres. Sally spoke kindly about my origins, and this is a new poem called Parentage. Parentage. Mine is not from the morass of Flanders marshes, although their hues ink my eyes. Not from a mother, her head spun always away, nor from convent walls or kisses that I hid, head bowed inside my childhood palms to quiet longing, such longing. But from a Flemish farmer once who held my face in both hands to kiss my brow for no more than a second. It was that brief, but with such will and tenderness that I can now lift my head far back to read the clouds. I'm from the ocean's melancholy, dragging its anchors back and forth, never quiet, never still, waves so restless they can't mirror the moon. I'm from those waters, those ebbings, from the 2 wedding bands on my finger, from them too, and from every book I ever held, my shelved provenance, language, womb, and sail. And because I talked to you about the Flanders and about the farmer, I'm going to read you a longer poem, which narrates a moment of kindness in my youth that was devout, that had no kindness, or almost no kindness. I want you to know that polders are tract of lowlands reclaimed from the North Sea by the construction of dikes, followed by another dike, followed by another dike. And then they drained the area and could plant potatoes and leeks and onions between those dikes. And you know, there was a Flemish potato called bintje, and the bintje potatoes, all you needed to do is throw them in water, didn't need to add salt because they grew in that salted earth that was taken from the ocean, and they had that taste of the ocean, those potatoes. They were good. Great Gullet Creek. Skies over the polders are never empty. They return to brood there year after year, the old congruent clouds. There's no better place on earth to be clouds than over that wild wind-blown edge of Flanders. No place where rain falls hard as willow knots, dull as North Sea froth, or with that shade of cobblestone gray. And nowhere do winds whistle this way, peaked and forlorn like muskrat calls in the Grote Geule, Great Gullet Creek. Once, in a Bruegel winter, a farmer and I sailed across Great Gullet Creek on the anger of Flemish winds. Christmas break, 1949. I'm 6. My parents leave me at the Grote Geule farm. They're going on a trip to very far away again. The farmer will take care of me. I must be obedient and say thank you. One day, the oldest farmer packs clothes, foods, and candles in a large basket. We'll spend a night in the fisherman's cabin on the creek. A surprise tomorrow, he says. All night, gales pound at the walls and windows. When I wake, it's still dark. I watch the farmer light the oil lamp, dress over his striped pajamas, pull a small cross out of his vest, kiss it, and put it back. He feeds the stove, throws in a match, and whomp! Flames burst out, spiked and golden. The farmer's face glows. Long shadows waltz on the walls. Eel nets swirl, rods and reeds wave. Frozen window panes glitter. The floor is liquid. Then clang! He slams the stove shut and everything is small and cold again. We stand by the stove. He helps me cover my chest and back with sheets of brown paper that we waxed the night before, melting candles in a tin can, and then pouring 2 layers of wax on each sheet of paper. Wind rage armors, he says, handing me blue varnished wooden shoes. On the table lit by the oil lamp, 2 twigs of licorice wood, a rock of raw sugar, an orange, 2 chunks of black bread. He cuts the orange in 2, shatters the rock of sugar with his knife, and stuffs the pieces deep into the orange. I chew the sour bread, suck at the sweet fruit. Outside, cold light oozes through the clouds. Daybreak. We walk toward the frozen creek. He pisses long and steamy on a mooring pole. Behind the poplars, a small sun barely sifts through the clouds. A brown buzzard cowers in a willow like a quilled Quasimodo. Flat-bottomed and upside down, a rowboat lies in the frozen field. The farmer slips his hand under the prow and orders, "Close your eyes." And then, look. 4 steel blades dangle from lever straps. Skates. We're going skating. From across the creek come broken, wind-gutted calls of the village church bells. Da-dong, da-dong. He looks at the sky. Skating will be good. The wind is angry. It's coming from Germany. We set foot on ice. January chews my cheeks, but I don't utter a sound. He'd warn me, only city fillies fuss. He hunches like a buzzard before taking flight, grabs the sides of his coat, opens his arms wide, turns his back to the wind, and lets it belt against him, propel him. He orders, "Grab my coat, crouch, hold on." A gust whacks me against him. He takes 2 wide strides, pulls me along, the wind pushes us, and we're sailing. The ice is littered with leaves, twigs. My skates send thunder through my legs. I can barely breathe. My lips and throat hurt, but I scream, "Faster, faster." He straightens his huge back, opens his arms even wider. His skates clatter, pelt my face with ice. We're picking up speed. The creek sounds like 100 drums, and my eyes freeze. I can no longer see, but I'm no city filly, no city filly. When we reach the opposite bank, our faces are blue, our knees so stiff we can't straighten our legs. I'm thirsty. He gives me his licorice stick to chew, rubs his palms, blows into them, and puts them to my cheeks. Winter blows low oboe notes through the reeds. A few yards away, northern shovelers quack and ruffle their feathers, sending rust and cobalt flashes over the ice. We untie our skates, turn our backs to the creek, and walk through the potato polders toward the village of Kieldrecht. My wooden shoes slip on frozen loam, but he holds me by the wrist. The winds won't stop. They churn clouds. They send them crashing into the steel blade of the horizon. We don't speak. We hurry through the village toward the cafe by the windmill. He pushes open the heavy oak door. A few nods and taciturn "Dag" from the stout drinking men. We head for the high Delft tiled stove and hang our coats on a chair beside it. The tables are covered with thick rug-like tapestries. I rub my hands over their wool. They smell of must and winter like the hem of the farmer's coat. He orders Dutch gin, buttered bread, mugs of broth. He pours gin into my broth. We slurp and slurp. He throws back his head, closes his eyes, crosses his hands on his belly, and smiles. Behind heavy lace curtains, I watch clouds shred against the church steeple. On the way back, our skates ring as he flings them over his shoulders. Winds blow night deep into the streets of Fieldrecht. Bundled silhouettes slip out of low doors, lock shutters, and disappear. Bent figures hurry by on black, high-handled bicycles. "Good night, farmer," they say. "Good night, farmer," he answers. We hurry home through the potato polders. When we near the farm, the dog yaps and cows bellow in the barn. At dinner, I asked the farmer for the cross he hid in his vest. I kiss it so it will keep my parents very far away. Outside, the Flemish winds sing, and from the village steeple fall 6 low notes. And my third and last poem is going to be a poem that I wrote 70 years after this experience. Also a poem of walking. Late afternoon stroll on the cliffs. As usual, Death sweetly slips her arm in mine, and we take a deep breath from the eucalyptus breeze. We both worked honestly at our jobs. All day, Death destroyed traffic with wailing ambulances, and I killed hours and lines on 8.5 by 11-inch pages. We're fast friends by now. Death, much older, of course, but there's no hierarchy between us. We're both taking a break from it all, glad to watch waves collapse on rocks and pelicans dive bomb fish. I try to be sensitive to Death's guilt, that whole pandemic disaster she can no longer control. She'll soon betray me, too. Like she will you, I know. But today, the gulls are silver angels etching great cursive blessings in a perfect day. So Death and I make believe we believe that and amble on. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Amazing reading, Laure-Anne. I'm reeling from it. That the skating and just all the senses coming alive. Thank you. Mark Doty is the author of several collections of poetry, most recently Deep Lane, W.W. Norton, 2015. He has been the recipient of many awards and honors. To name just one, Fire to Fire, New and Collected Poems won the National Book Award in 2008. His newest publication is a memoir, What is the Grass? Walt Whitman in My Life, which was published in April of 2020. Whenever I read Mark Doty's poems, which is as often as I can, I feel like I am hearing filigreed sonics, a kind of close observation so precisely translated into sound that it feels palpable in the air. When asked why he thinks people need poems, he responded, The reason why literature exists becomes so clear when you read a poem and find named or given shape there for a perception, feeling, or thought you recognize, something that feels familiar even though you've never heard it named. It could be something quite small, the fragrant aura of cold around the sleeves and collar of someone who's just come indoors on a frigid day, the almost fluorescent blue of a gentian flower. These moments make the world larger, make us less alone in some way. In his poem, Brian, Age 7, Doty describes a store window where children have painted self-portraits. The speaker of the poem is moved by a particular child's portrait, and the poem speaks, I think, to the difficulty of defining or pinning down the particularities of just how art is able to give shape to a perception so that the viewer or reader is able to feel it. It isn't craft that makes this figure come alive. Brian draws just balls and lines and wobbly crayon strokes. Why do some marks seem to thrill with life, possess a portion of the nervous energy in their maker's hand? There is that magic in Doty's work that lets us feel the energy from his own creative hand. An older poem, a favorite of mine, called A Green Crab's Shell, opens with this precise description that works to pin down just what particular green the poet sees. Not exactly green, closer to bronze, preserved in kind brine, something retrieved from a Greco-Roman wreck, patinated and oddly muscular. I've always loved those lines. And in another poem titled What is the Grass, Doty describes a girl's marginalia in that famous work in answer to Whitman's question, what is the grass? The girl writes, isn't it grass? I love what follows in Doty's poem, which offers a kind of meditation on what language can and cannot do, depending on your point of view. Later, I come to imagine that she, the girl, had faith in language. That was the difference. She believed that the word settled things. The matter need not be looked into again. And he, Whitman, who'd written his book over and over, nearly ruining it, so enchanted by what had first compelled him, for him, the word settled nothing at all. I will close with this quote from Mark Doty's Dog Years that has stayed with me and seems so true to the creative process. We are always trying to figure them, dogs, out. The expression is telling. To figure out is to make figures of speech, to invent metaphors to help us understand the world. Thank you, Mark Doty, for helping us all gain more of that understanding. Please welcome Mark Doty.
It was really lovely, thank you. I'm very grateful for that introduction. And very grateful too to be able to read. I have a cold this week, I'm getting better, so hopefully my voice won't be as raw as it was when I did a craft talk. Grateful to be with a remarkable workshop. People have brought such openness to this group, have been so willing to go with me on any exercise that they might well have considered a little peculiar, but we'll try it anyway. And such emotional depth and such investment. I'm honored to be working with you, and this reading is for you. I want to read some poems from different points in my life, but I want to begin with a poem that I've been thinking about because I wrote an essay about it this week for an anthology in which poets describe or think about a favorite poem of theirs. And it surprised me that this poem came up because it's not a characteristic one. It's a poem that started when I was teaching at an experimental college in Vermont. We had one experiment that actually worked, which was to bring students with children to campus. We had single parents living on the campus and providing them with daycare and scholarships and the possibility of improving their lives. And this meant that children were every place, every place. So this is called No. The children have brought their wood turtle into the dining hall because they want us to feel the power they have when they hold a house in their own hands, want us to feel alien lacquer and the little thrill that he might, like God, show his face. He's the color of ruined wallpaper, of cognac, and he's closed, pulled in as though he'll never come out. Nothing shows but the plummy leather of the legs, his claws resembling clusters of diminutive raspberries. They know he makes night anytime he wants. So perhaps he feels at the center of everything, as they do. His age, greater than that of anyone around the table, is a room from which they are excluded, though they don't mind, since they can carry this perfect building anywhere. They love that he might poke out his old face, but doesn't. I think the children smell unopened, like unlit candles, as they heft him around the table, praise his secrecy, holding to each adult face his prayer, the single word of the shell, which is no. This is a little later poem, which began one morning. I was driving in Jersey City, January, frozen, barren day, and I came upon a beauty shop, which had just been set ablaze. And you could tell because the glass was broken. There was just a little tiny bit of flame licking out. There were sirens in the distance, nobody inside at all. And I thought, what do I do? And I kept on driving. And, excuse me. As I did so, a line emerged and began to haunt me for a while. This poem is in the form of the house that Jack built. So every stanza ends with a version of the same line, and each stanza is one line longer than the one before. I hope you can hear them stack up. It's called House of Beauty. In Jersey City, on Tonnelle Avenue, the House of Beauty is burning. On a Sunday morning in January, under the chilly shadow of the Pulaski Skyway, the House of Beauty is burning. Who lobbed the fire bottles through the glass, in among the clippers and combs, the helmets and clippers and, I'm sorry. I've got to get my light a little brighter, excuse me. I'm there, much better. Okay, we're gonna start over this poem. House of Beauty. In Jersey City, on Tonnelle Avenue, the House of Beauty is burning. On Sunday morning in January, under the chilly shadow of the Pulaski Skyway, the House of Beauty is burning. Who lobbed the fire bottle through the glass, in among the creams and thrones, the helmets and clippers and combs? Who set the House of Beauty burning? In the dark recess beside the sink, where heads lay back to be laved under the perfected heads, rode along the walls, the hopeful photographs of possibility darken, now that the House of Beauty is burning. The skyway beetles in the ringing cold, trestle arcing the steel river and warehouses, truck lots and Indian groceries, a new plume of smoke joining the others, billow of dark thought rising from the broken forehead of the House of Beauty. An emission almost too small to notice just now. Alarm still ringing, the flames new launched on their project of ruining an effort at pleasure. Glass jutting like cracked dice in the window frame, no one inside, someone on the way. All things by nature, wrote Virgil, are ready to get worse. No surprise then that the House of Beauty is burning. Though whatever happens, however far these fires proceed, reducing history to powder, whatever the House of Beauty made is untouchable now. Nothing can undo so much shapelessness made permanent, or at least acceptable. So much shapelessness given what are called permanence, though nothing holds a fixed form. Bring on the flames. What does it matter if the house is burning? Propose a new beauty, perennially unhoused, neither the lost things nor the fire itself, but the objects in their dresses of disaster, anything clothed in its own passage. Padded vinyl chair burst into smoky tongues, lucite helmet sagged to a new version of its dome. Our black bridge, a charred rainbow on iron legs, two ruby eyes glowering from its crown. If beauty is burning, what could you save? The House of Beauty is a house of flames. A little more rearranging. So we've been talking this week about ekphrastic poetry, among other things, poems written in response to a work of art, and talking about the difficulty of trying to describe color, trying to describe the incredible immediacy of color to the eye. And I talked a little bit about the great abstract expressionist painter Joan Mitchell. She was lesser known than de Kooning or certainly Jackson Pollock, of course, because she was a woman and she had to act like one of the guys, which she did. She swore and drank and smoked with the best of them. Also, her canvases were enormous and very difficult to reproduce, so that you can't tell from a photograph that this magnificent wall of color is doing what it does. So I was thinking about those paintings when I was living in Houston and listening to the ongoing racket of cicadas, locusts, those incredible buzzing insects that filled the summer air. This comes in little sections. It's called To Joan Mitchell. At twilight, the locusts begin, waves and waves, nothing to do with lamentation. No one's told them the world is ending. They proceed as always, everything subsumed into, you can't call it a cry exactly, no singularity in it, but the thousands, the 10,000 voices? Not singing. Audible undulation, the waves these bodies make, seamless, encompassing, filling deNiord Street. As it should be. I want them not knowing. In this way, the sound becomes a kind of refuge, filled with safety and splendor. Or it's more like the big sound puts its hands under your arms and elevates you, effortless. Gyrating momentum pulls you upward with it, collective undulation, having become a unified, rising motion. Like her great canvas, in 4 panels, like her great canvas, in 4 panels, continuous field, so charged as to fill the room in which it hangs with an inaudible humming, as if to erase the gallery over which it triumphs. Almost audible. Weft of continuous color, blocks of mint, green-yellow glaze, olive floating above a violet underpainting, contentious against the citron and yellow-flung, seamless texture, like the hare of the cicadas, ceaseless music, through which outbreaks of blue assert themselves, as if she'd made the human equivalent of their spiraling. And this was faith. No trust ever held in constancy, only what's relinquished over and over has about it the heft of the genuine. The canvas firmly centered in its living, drenched, upright posture of its color, the authority of her green, more firmly itself than anyone in the room. In the flashpoint summer of 2002, it was possible to feel where we were headed. Sun screwing its titanium compress down on human foreheads in the parking lots, thin tamarisks on the margin shimmering a little, as if seen through hazes of gasoline. And I was in the absolute darkness of Fresno, past the middle of my life, as if I'd been colonized by the long swaths of car lots, flapping pennants, stunned under the mercury lamps, will and inwardness thinned like the chemical haze over the lettuce fields, smokes risen from torn-up vineyards, weary vines heaped for burning. And then, a guy in a leather bar, wisdom itself, I swear, in an ordinary bearded face, held my right hand and stared down into the contradictory fretwork, drawn to me and not going home with me, nothing as simple as that, though we were 2 spiked intensities of pulse and aura. He was holding back an enormous force of perception, translating the lines in my palm. And he said to me, the one possible thing I'd believe, sometimes you just have to make a little faith. That fountaining canvas, expansive presence in the museum room, organized and intensified vitality, ineradicable in spite of the new void we've made looming everywhere over the vineyards and shopping centers and car lots from here to Houston, to New York City, relentless, locked in, poised to erase. The picture spoke its greed. So this poem has to do with my late and quite dear friend, Stanley Kunitz. I met Stanley when he was around 90, and I was invited to write a little journalistic piece in a magazine about his birthday. And they said, you better go because it's probably gonna be the last one. Then I went to about 9 more of his birthday parties. And for one of them, I gave him a gift, a plant that I thought he would like. Stanley was a famous gardener. He was, this will give you a sense of his character. He was on a television show. He was asked, or a radio show. He was asked by an eager journalist, Mr. Kunitz, if you could be present at any 3 events in history, what would you choose? And Stanley said, the creation. And the journalist, not to be, put off, said, and what other 2 events, Mr. Kunitz? And Stanley said, tomorrow and tomorrow. So that was he. And just find this last one. Didn't you? Heaven for Stanley. For his birthday, I gave Stanley a hyacinth bean, an annual, so he wouldn't have to wait for the flowers. He said, Mark, I have just the place for it, as if he'd spent 98 years anticipating the arrival of this particular vine. I thought poetry a brace against time, the hours held up for study in a voice as cool saline, but his allegiance is not to permanent forms. His garden's all furious change, budding and rot, and then the coming up again. Why prefer any single part of the round? I don't know that he'd change a word of it. I think he could be forever pleased to participate in motion. Something opens. He writes it down. Heaven steadies and concentrates near the lavender. He's already there. Around the same time that I was thinking about Stanley's aging, I had a very elderly dog, a big retriever who lived to be 16. And this is a poem from fairly late in his life, and I want to read it to you. You'll see why in a few minutes. Where are you, poem? This is called The Stairs. The dog's name was Arden, and we lived in a house with an extremely narrow antique staircase. Back when Arden could still climb our stairs, sharply pitched, turning near the top, the sort old carpenters modeled on the stairways of ships, he'd follow Paul up to his study, shadow me up the stairs for socks or a clean shirt. Even if I only went upstairs for a minute, he'd wheeze and labor on the narrow steps and arrive out of breath, proud of himself, and collapse on the rug before coming down again, up and down, all day. At night, he wanted to sleep in his bed at the foot of ours, wanted it so badly, the pressure intensified the climb. What with those tall risers and his gimpy hind legs? No, he cried, and fussed, and cried, gave up, and went away, came back, and tried again. If he couldn't make it on his own, I'd get up and help him, lifting his front paws and setting them into place, then my hands under his hips. The stairwell would smell of his anxiety, bodily, familiar, slightly acid. Once he could no longer climb, something so awkward, it was as if he'd forgotten he ever wanted to. He'd wedge his muzzle into a hole he'd made in the sliding screen door, push it to the left, and sleep all night in the garden, on the gravel, beneath the spread of a Montauk daisy. Why can't I hold on to that image, the dreamer beneath black leaves and a spatter of summer stars? Indelible, that old man scent, the fear that makes the stairway steeper. So 20 years pass, and this is a recent poem. This is about my dog Ned, who I lost just this winter. Golden retriever, big guy. The Stairs, 2. Nearly 12, Ned lifts one broad paw onto the next step up, and when it slides a bit to the right, pulls it in toward his body and pushes from below. Then the left paw follows, and he has hauled his bulk up one step. 3 flights. Hard enough for him to stand up from the worn spot on the rug where he sleeps the day away, head parked on the cool marble threshold of the kitchen door. Remarkable how he huffs and focuses and steams up the first flight, negotiates a sort of shorter set, and confronts the longer, curving stair that spills him out into the hall before the apartment door. I praise his determination, his stamina, and pluck. He makes just one demand, these morning and evening salvos up the stairs. If I walk too quickly and pause a few risers in front of him, he waits and goes no further, He waits until I climb back down to him. He's made it clear. We go side by side, or he will not go at all. In this way, he proposes we will enter the future. Sometimes I stall, as if a cold plunge opened beneath my shoes, as if the next step gave way to a wrong end of the telescope view of time ahead without him. And then he puts one paw on the tread immediately above us and waits for me to do the same. And I'm going to end with another new poem, relatively new. This one, a sort of different turn of attention. It has to do with the kind of racially motivated violence which we have all seen now with new eyes because of these devices, the accessibility of video, and also because we're ready to see it, ready to look at it. And one of the most horrific examples of this, to my mind, was the death of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old boy who was shot by the police in Cleveland, Ohio, because he was playing with a plastic gun in a town park. I didn't know that boy. I could not write a personal elegy, but I could think about what happens when time is interrupted, all that poured into the creation of Tamir Rice, and all the time that ended when he left this world, that kind of implosion. This is called In 2 Seconds, and the title runs right into the first line of the poem. In 2 seconds, the boy's face climbed back down the 12-year tunnel of its becoming, a charcoal sunflower swallowing itself. Who has eyes to see or ears to hear? If you could see what happens fastest, unmaking the human irreplaceable, a star falling into complete gravitational darkness from all points of itself, all this, the held, loved body, into which entered milk and music, honeying the cells of him, who sang to him, stroked the nape of the scalp, kissed the flesh knot after the cord completed its work of fueling into him the long history of those whose suffering was made more bearable by the as yet unknown of him, playing alone in some unthinkable future city, a Cleveland, whatever that might be. 2 seconds to elapse. The arc of joy in the conception bed, the labor of hands repeated until the hands no longer required attention, so that as the woman folded, her hopes for him sank into the fabric of his shirts and underpants. Down they go, swirling down into the maw of a greater dark. Treasure box, comic books, pocket knife, bell from a lost cat's collar. Why even begin to enumerate them when behind every tributary poured into him comes rushing backward all he hasn't been yet? Everything that boy could have thought or made, sung or theorized, built on the quavering but continuous structure that had preceded him, sank into an absence in the shape of a boy in Ohio, playing with a plastic gun in the middle of the afternoon. When I say 2 seconds, I don't mean the time it took him to die. I mean the lapse between the instant the cruiser braked to a halt on the grass, between that moment and the one in which the officer fired his weapon. 2 seconds taken to assess the situation. And though I believe it is the work of art to try on at least the moment and skin of another, for this hour, I respectfully decline. I refuse it. May that officer be visited every night of his life by an enormity collapsing in front of him into an incomprehensible bloom and the voice that howls out of it. If this is no poem, then, with that voice, erased boy, beloved of time, who did nothing to no one and became nothing because of it, I know that voice is one of the things we call poetry. It isn't to his killer he's speaking. Thank you.